Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the American Cetacean Society, San Francisco Bay Chapter's October 2024 speaker event. And I'm Susan Hopp, board member responsible for our speaker program, and with me is fellow board member Wade Cobb. So first, a little introduction for anyone new to the American Cetacean Society. We are a chapter within a national organization that is the oldest nonprofit dedicated to the protection of whales, dolphins, porpoises, and their habitat. And we do this through education, community engagement, and awarding grants towards cetacean research. And of course, we appreciate your donations in support of our mission. They fund our mission, our grants, and these expenses for these talks. It's easy to donate on our website. You know, many of you do, and we really appreciate it. So thank you. All right, well, a couple announcements. First, really happy to report that our online class, The Gulf of the Greater Farallones and its Inhabitants, completed last week. It was 6 Wednesdays. It was led by 2 of our board members, marine biologist Mark Weber and naturalist and teacher Susan Sherman. They put a lot of work into it, but it was all very gratifying based on student reaction and feedback. And we hope to do it again in 2025, and we'll keep you updated as well as on our website with dates as they become available. Now, the next announcement we are really excited about. We are announcing our new research grant for 2024. The application is now open through the remainder of the year, and we plan to announce the award in January. Information will be on our website for the application. We'll be sending out announcements, but funding research towards cetacean knowledge and conservation is really a critical part of our mission. So, and that really brings us to tonight's presentation, which we're recording. And as always, put your questions in the Q&A, so we'll get to them after the presentation. But tonight is so very special because we will be hearing from our most recent grantee, Dr. Nico Ransome, the recipient of the ACS SF Bay Chapter's 2023 Christine Fitzsimmons Cetacean Research Grant. And Nico is going to relate her study of a threatened distinct population segment of humpback whales spanning Central and North America. So a little bit about Nico. She is a whale biologist with 18 years of experience. In addition to her master's in marine science and master's of science in marine science and management, she completed her PhD in May of 2023 on the spatial ecology of humpback whales in mainland Mexico. She runs a research project in Mexico and helps run one in El Salvador. She is a research associate of Murdoch University in Western Australia, as well as a researcher in Rarotonga in the Cook Islands. She describes her main research focus as the study of anthropogenic impacts on large whales of the Eastern Tropical Pacific, but she has a special passion for behavioral ecology and migration ecology of humpback whales. Nico has published over 19 articles and reports, and she's got at least 7 more in process. And I know from just our communication over the cybersphere that she is traveling the globe in support of cetaceans. So, Nico, thank you so much for being here and for your work, and I hand it over to you.
Well, thank you so much. I was about to introduce myself, but you did such a wonderful job. But I will just still say that my full name is Nicola. No one calls me Nicola, really. I do publish under the name Nicola. My mother is probably the only person who calls me Nicola. And as you quickly said, my name is Nico or Nicola Ransome, and I'm still affiliated with Murdoch University. That is where I got my PhD from. And I'm based down in La Orca de Sayulita, which is a whale research and a whale watching company down in Mexico. So today I'm going to present on the humpback whales of the Central America distinct population segment in Mexico. And so as you so kindly just introduced me, I am a whale researcher. It's actually now I realize it's my 20th year in Mexico this year. So working with the humpback whales of Mexico. All the places that you can see the stars, I've worked in all of those places with whales, mostly with humpback whales. It was once my mission to work with every population of humpback whales in the world. I haven't quite managed it yet, but you never know. One day I might get there. But yeah, the population I know really well is the population that swims between Mexico and California. So for 20 years now, I've been working with the population in Mexico. For 11 years, I've been a principal investigator of a research project here. And I'm also, for the last 5 years, the principal investigator and helping run a project down in El Salvador. So just to say, where is Sayulita? This is where I'm based, in Sayulita, Mexico. It's at the entrance to the Sea of Cortez. It's halfway down the Pacific coast in Mexico. And as you can see, most of our work, we do all sorts of different work, but mostly it's boat-based work. And we tend to go out in these very small vessels. So we call them pangas. It's an open-hulled fiberglass boats, usually around 24 to 28 feet. And as you can see, where we go out, that's also where I work, sorry, in El Salvador, which is further down the coast. But where we go out in Mexico, we don't have a marina. So we're going out, as you can see from the middle photo, we're going out through the waves, through the surf. Some days we don't get out. When it gets over 2 meters, it gets a little bit dangerous for us to go out, but it's very grassroots because we don't have a marina. In general, there's very few other boats around, and it's a beautiful location to do whale research. I just really wanted to start by saying how grateful I am to have been awarded this research grant. I did not know Chris or Christine myself, but I have read lots about her, and I just wanted to say how appreciative I am to the San Francisco Bay chapter of the American Cetacean Society and to her family for creating this award. And, you know, when I finished my PhD, it was kind of a funny time in the world. It was 2022 when I handed in my thesis in August, and that was really the height of the pandemic in Australia. It hit Australia far later, and obviously I was going through a lot of change, handing in my PhD, and then a lot of personal change as well. And it was just quite a monumental time for me. And a lot of people go straight in to do other research. And I went straight to go and do the field work. And then I was kind of thinking, what's going to happen afterwards? I didn't say it when I handed in my PhD. It was actually the day that Fran, the very famous humpback whale, was found deceased on the beach. The Queen of England died that week. So it was all a bit of a shocking time. And anyway, there was a lot of change in my life. And I did the whale season. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then I applied for this grant. And getting it really, really was very motivational for me. And I really just wanted to say how grateful I am. And thank you to Christine's family and to you guys. I know she was a close colleague of yours for awarding me this. I hope that you are going to enjoy my presentation and how we use the money, because it really was, and we really made sure that every dollar counted, and we really did work very hard, and we really hope that it's going to bring great benefits to the humpback whales of the region that travel up to California. So thank you. Just a background into the study. Obviously, you all know what humpback whales are. I think I've got an audience that can fully appreciate what a humpback whale is, but I will just say the humpback whale is probably the 9th largest whale species in the world, known as humpback whale, or Mega Atheronoviangeli, which means the big finned or the great wings of New England, because of those huge pectoral fins they have, which can go up to just 115 feet, which means the wingspan or the fin span can be over 30 feet. They've obviously got these very distinctive tubercles on their upper and lower jaw, and these very beautiful tail flukes that we can take images of to identify them. But of course, it is a large baleen whale. On average, they're around 46 feet, this says. I've heard the largest they found in modern times was up to 52 feet. The estimated weight is anywhere from around 25 to 40 tons. And of course, they're part of the Balaenopteridae family. This doesn't have all the images of all the Balaenopteridiids right now, but it has most of them. And I really like this illustration because it kind of shows not only their size difference, but it also shows that the humpback whale is very unique in this family. There are two genera in the Balaenopteridae, the Balaenoptera, which are all the other whales that look very similar, and then the humpback whale, the odd one out, which is the only Megaaptera. And I think it really shows what a unique and beautiful species that the humpback whale is, even within its family of the rorquals. And it's a cosmopolitan species. What does that mean? It's very cultured. It means it has a very wide distribution. It is found in every ocean. It is found in the northern and in the southern hemisphere. And of course, they are migratory. So humpback whales have set migratory patterns. They have populations around the world. And they spend part of the year in high latitudes, in cold waters where they feed. So they're feeding areas. They then migrate up to, or in the northern hemisphere, down to tropical waters at low latitudes where they breed in both the northern and in the southern hemisphere. So they are migratory species. They travel thousands of kilometers in each year between the high latitude feeding areas and the low latitude breeding areas. Of course, there is one exception. There's always one exception. That's the Arabian Sea population, unfortunately an endangered population. If you actually look, they're in the northern hemisphere and they can't really travel up north any further there because of the land, but there's also an upwelling in that region. So they follow northern hemisphere breeding times, I believe, but they feed year round. So that's a small endangered population. But the humpback whale is considered to be a migratory species. So you all know far more about feeding areas than I do. I've worked, well, I was in the Aleutian Islands recently. I worked in Alaska and northern British Columbia, but that's pretty much the only feeding areas that I've been in for humpback whales. But they're in cold waters, in high latitudes. And of course, that's where humpback whales go to feed. That's why they're called feeding areas. They engorge themselves often all day and in some places all through the night as well. So they go up there to build up their energy supplies, their blubber. They can eat up to 2.5 tons of food a day is the latest estimate. And obviously their prey species is mainly small schooling fish. So things like sandlands, sardines, herring. The biggest thing I think I've ever heard them to feed on is mackerel, but it's mostly fish that live in schools under 30 centimeters length, or they feed mainly on krill. When they're up there, their endocrine activity changes. So males produce less testosterone, they produce less sperm. Females are generally not thought to go into oestrus or estrus, then not to be receptive when they are in their feeding areas, definitely not for most of the season. So they spend all of their time, most of their time, eating and then resting. So they're engorging themselves, gaining incredible amounts of weight. They then migrate down to their breeding areas where in general they fast. Most of the, well, nearly all the information we have from the whaling industry shows that when they found and killed humpback whales in their breeding areas, they very rarely had food in their stomachs. It's very rare to see feeding behavior of humpback whales in breeding areas. So in general, they fast when they're in these breeding areas. After traveling up north and gaining tremendous amounts of weight, they will then travel down to their breeding areas where they will stop feeding and they will lose significant amounts of weight. They're here to mate, they're here to give birth, and they're here to nurse their young. They're in warm tropical waters, so like the picture on the right, that's why I live mostly, no, it's not why I live mostly in humpback whale breeding areas, but humpback whale breeding areas are generally found in tropical waters around the world and often in very beautiful places. So humpback whales of the North Pacific, that's what we're here to talk about today, and I know you're all very familiar with them. But their breeding areas stretch across the tropical areas of the North Pacific, and we have 4 breeding areas recognized today in 3 main regions. So we have the Western North Pacific breeding area, so the humpback whales of the Babuyan Islands of the Philippines, of the Okinawa and Ogasawara Islands of Japan, and the humpback whales also in the Mariana Islands. There is some still people that believe there may be a missing breeding area out there somewhere too. We also have the humpback whales in the center of the North Pacific. Of course, they are the Hawaiian Islands. And then we have humpback whales in the eastern North Pacific, where we have 2 breeding areas. So the Mexico breeding area for humpback whales, and then the Central America breeding area. Most of the humpback whale breeding areas in the North Pacific are around 20 degrees north of the equator. Central America, though, goes all the way down to Panama, which I think is 9 degrees. I saw one the other day that I had from there, I think somewhere around 9 degrees north of the equator. Then the feeding areas, they go all the way up the west coast of North America. So starting in California, Oregon, Washington, up to British Columbia, up to Alaska, across the Gulf of Alaska, across the Aleutian Islands, where I had the pleasure of being recently, and then over to Russia. So that whole Pacific Rim is considered feeding area for humpback whales of the North Pacific. So I'm going to talk about something that I'm pretty sure you all know about, but I'm going to talk about photo identification of humpback whales. You can identify individual humpback whales by their tails. If you can get a good quality photo of the underside of their tail, it is like a fingerprint of a human being. It is that individual. So it's the shape of the tail, the form of the tail, the coloration, the pigmentation, the serration of the trailing edge, and the shape of the median knot, the bit in the middle. With a good quality photo of the underside of their tail, you should be able to identify a humpback whale throughout its life, as long as it doesn't have any major accidents. So it usually stays more or less the same. And because of that, if you can identify individuals through space and time, you can learn more about them. You can learn more about that individual, about the population it's part of, and about the species of humpback whale in general. So all around the world where there are humpback whales, since the 1970s it really started, although they came up with the idea in the 60s. In the 1970s, there are people who are trying to build up what we call fluke identification catalogs of images of different humpback whales' tails, of different whales that visit that area each year. And that is one of the main tools that we have to learn. It's great because it's non-invasive, it's cheap, and you just need to stand there with a camera, and it takes, you know, a lot of time to be a curator of a catalog, a lot of effort out on the ocean, but it is an incredible tool to be able to do whale research. It's probably the most basic tool, but still probably one of the best. It's almost limitless what you can learn about humpback whales by taking pictures of their tails. Sometimes also we take pictures of their dorsal fins if they have very distinctive dorsal fins. When we work in the southern hemisphere, their flanks can have very distinctive pigmentation patterns. Sometimes, unfortunately, they may even have injuries that we can identify them by, but predominantly it is the fluke that we take the photos to identify them. And what we've realized over time, and not me because I haven't been doing research as long as that, but we realized that humpback whales have very high site fidelity. What does that mean? It means they return to the same place each year. It's believed that migration is a learned process. It is not an innate process. They don't just born and know where they go. It is a learned process. It is imprinted on them by their mother in their first year of life. So the calf humpback whale usually stays with its mother for a full year, sometimes 2, very rarely more than that, but usually just around a year. And in that time, its mother teaches it its full migration. So humpback whales usually return to the place of their birth. That's what we call natal filipatry. So when the female goes to give birth, say in Nayarit, where I live, it's probably where she was born. It's potentially where her mother was born as well. So it's a maternally inherited migration. So this humpback whale was born in Nayarit. This is a whale that migrates between Nayarit and the Aleutians in Dutch Harbor. So in the first year of life, they travel up to the Aleutian Islands. They spend maybe, 5 or 6, 7 months up there. They then return back down to Nayarit. This is where usually they'll separate. The poor calf left on its own for the first time, but it remembers the migration, and for the rest of its life, which may be 50 years or more, we just don't know, it's going to continue migrating between those two places. So they have high site fidelity. Typically, they return to the same place each year. So it's the place they were born and to their mother's preferred feeding area where she took them in their first year of life. So North Pacific humpback whale migratory connections, we actually know quite a lot about this right now, predominantly because of this incredible study that was started in 2004 and ran through till 2006. 2004 was, that was around the first time that I actually started working in Mexico. And it's called the SPLASH project. I'm sure you all know what that is. Structure, population, level of abundance of humpback whales of the North Pacific. It occurred over 3 years. It was happening in 10 different countries, involving 40 different research groups, over 400 researchers. For 3 years, everyone was out on the water in feeding and breeding areas, trying to take photos of all of the whales they saw in all of these places and trying to take biopsy samples sometimes as well. It is still to date the largest collaborative project of a whale species, I believe, and it is incredible the data that was collected during that time. They managed to get, I can't actually remember the number of fluke identifications, but it was an incredible number. And they estimated at the time that there was over 20,000 humpback whales in the North Pacific. They managed to see that there was a very clear migratory pattern, that generally humpback whales in the east and center and west of the North Pacific were split, although the conclusion was the pattern was more complex than previously thought. So there were a few surprises. For example, one humpback whale from Mexico was identified in Russia. But in general, they stick to the sides of the ocean basin in general. So one thing, and we're going to be talking mostly about today, is Central American whales. So Central American whales, this is from Splash, and Central American whales you can see there on the right. Whilst a lot of the other whales, there was a really high diversity of feeding areas that the whales were matched to, the Central American whales, that was not the case. It was predominantly all whales that were matched to California and Oregon, with just a few that were matched to northern Washington and southern British Columbia, so up by the US-Canadian border. But most of them were matched just to California and Oregon. If you look at the graph next door, MXML, that means mainland Mexico. That's where I am right now. And you can see the dramatic difference. In fact, Mexico is like a melting pot for humpback whales all over the North Pacific. We receive humpback whales from every single feeding area in the North Pacific. That is not the case for Central American whales. Central American whales are predominantly found only really matched to California predominantly. And that was also shown in the biopsy samples when they did a study of the diversity of the haplotypes of the mitochondrial DNA of humpback whales that were collected in all the seasonal habitat of humpback whales from the North Pacific during the Splash project. If you look down on the right, you can see that comparatively very, very low diversity of haplotypes. And they said that the Central America appears to be a pure breeding stock that mixes with others on the feeding grounds of California and Oregon. So really a pure breeding stock in Central America. This is a study that we did more recently, so and just very simple matching using happy whale. I know you all know about happy whale. I'm going to talk about it in just one moment, but just we matched, I think it was 80 humpback whales. It's more than that. Somewhere around 100 humpback whales from El Salvador that we'd taken before 2021. And you can see once again, nearly all of the matches, I think it was 87% were from California, and just a few came from BC and WA, and just one, which was a surprise, from Southeast Alaska. N equals 1, maybe not that significant, but we were very excited to see a Southeast Alaska humpback whale. That's it, 87% were matched to a feeding area, which is an incredibly high proportion of whales on happy whale that was matched to a feeding area. So you can see literally all of the Central American whales, most of them actually go to California. So very high match rate with California, a pure breeding stock. So as part of the Endangered Species Act, they have to review different species that are found in the waters of the United States. So in 2016, they did a review of the global status of humpback whales. And they identified that there were 14 distinct population segments in breeding areas around the world of humpback whales. The magnificent news was that 9 of the distinct population segments were classified as not at risk. However, of those found in the North Pacific, surprisingly, 3 of them were classified as at risk. So it was the Mexico DPS was classified as threatened, the Central America DPS was classified as endangered, and the Western North Pacific was also classified as endangered. So the status for the Mexico DPS, they declared, was because there was a little bit of doubt about how many whales there actually were in Mexico, and because there was a definite risk, high risk of entanglement for humpback whales in Mexico. So it was because they weren't really sure exactly how many whales there were in Mexico, they were classified as threatened. Since this classification, there's been more effort to try and get more accurate abundancy estimates of humpback whales from Mexico. But in Central America, it is most definitely an endangered distinct population segment. There are, at the time, with the splash data, that was estimated only to be around 500. Today, there's an updated estimate that came out from work from Splash 2 and from effort being put to take more samples down in Central America, and now it's estimated to be around 800 to 1,000 individuals. So most definitely an endangered distinct population segment, increasing at a very slow rate, potentially only around 2% per year. So if you compare that to where I've been working in Western Australia, where there's around 40,000 humpback whales at least, and the population, the distinct population segment is increasing by about 11% annually, it really gives you a clear idea of how endangered the Central America distinct population segment is. So it really was quite concerning, but also there was significant implications for management. As you all know far better than I do, there is a real problem with entanglements of humpback whales in Dungeness crab pots in the waters of California. Between 2010 and 2013, there were less than 10 entanglements actually reported. But in 2016, there were 56 reported entanglements. 42 of those were confirmed, and nearly a third of them were in Dungeness crab pots. Now, this presents a real problem because each entanglement is actually a violation of the Endangered Species Act and the Marine Mammal Protection Act, because of the status of endangerment of the Central America and the threatened status of the distinct population segments that we know spend a lot of time in Californian water. So what can we do? Well, it's my understanding at 2023, as I'm sure you know, that California actually presented to being able to the California Fisheries and Wildlife Department actually said they should put in a claim to be able to use the word take, to actually continue the fisheries through using the word take actually to signify entanglement, saying that they should actually be able to continue and declare that there will be so many entanglements actually occurring each year. And it's going to take several years for the case actually to be, if people actually decide what's going to happen with the management of the Dungeness crab pot fisheries in California. It's worth, I believe, around 100 million. And I know some fishermen from the region who are obviously there's great conflict, human and wildlife conflict on this subject. So how can we help down here in Mexico? Well, for the whales, to get to Central America, they have to travel through Mexican water. So what we want to be able to do is to be able to give information to help with the management up in California. This is a migratory species. We know that most of these whales will be leaving the Californian feeding areas. So what can we do in Mexico? Well, they have to come through Mexico first. So we can try and provide you guys up there with the information of when the whales are actually leaving California. The first place they're going to be seen is in Mexico on their way down to Central America. And so this is really what we've been trying to do. We've been trying to do something that before 2020 hadn't been started. We've been trying to do early season research in Mexico. We've been trying to photo identify the first whales that come through Mexican waters, because it was first realized about 10 years ago that they were actually probably Central America whales. And so what we've been trying to do is photo identify them, actually take images of them rather than just noting down, oh, so-and-so said they saw a whale yesterday, but actually photo identify them so that we can give you the information of when they are leaving California, when they're arriving in Mexico, which is often a week or so more before they actually arrive down in Central America. So that is our main objective, and it is of course using happy whale. So I mentioned happy whale, but I didn't explain happy whale. I know you all know very well what happy whale is, but it is an artificial intelligence based image recognition algorithm that is an online platform where we can upload our fluke tail images, and they can be matched to a catalog which has over 27,000 individuals in just the North Pacific. If it's a good quality photo, if it's in focus, if it's a good angle, there's about a 97 to 99% rate of matching. So this project is using happy whale as a major tool to be able to photo identify the humpback whales of Central America when they're cruising through Mexico. So this fieldwork was funded for the 2023 season, and we call it the early season research, and I do it specifically in somewhere called Sayulita and Nayarit in Mexico, where I showed you where it was before. So you can see it's very busy in this image. It's not always that busy. This was actually during Easter week, which we call Semana Santa. But we have whales often staying later in the season too. So that was during an Easter week, but you can see the whales coming very close in Sayulita. And the objectives of the study is to identify the time that the whales are first arriving in Mexico, to take identification images of the early season whales in Mexico, and to assess when the Central America DPS is traveling through Mexico. So that is our main mission. when we say Mexico, I know you all know Mexico, but this is the area that we call mainland Mexico. So mainland Mexico is one of the main breeding areas in Mexico. You've also got Baja California and the Revillagigedo archipelago, so the islands that are around 350 miles from the coastline. Southern Mexico is where there's been more research effort in recent times, and a lot of that is considered to be part of the Central America DPS, but our breeding area, the Central America DPS. But where we are focused is in mainland Mexico. And mainland Mexico is really a heaven for humpback whales for their breeding areas. Humpback whales seem to seek out sheltered, shallow, warm water areas for their breeding areas around 20 degrees north of the equator. Or south of the equator, and mainland Mexico hits all of those places. It's sheltered by the Baja California Peninsula. It's sheltered by those islands offshore called the Marias Islands. Here we have a very wide continental shelf. So the continental shelf in mainland Mexico is much, much wider than most of Mexico. Most of Mexico, it's only around 10 kilometers. In mainland Mexico, much of it stretches out over 120 kilometers, and it's got perfect water temperature of around 24 to 28 degrees Celsius. I can't remember what that is from Fahrenheit, sorry. But it's perfect humpback whale sea surface temperature for their breeding areas. The very famous place that is in mainland Mexico is Puerto Vallarta. So Puerto Vallarta sits at the bottom of mainland Mexico in the large bay known as Banderas Bay. So why have people not been doing early season research before? So here's a picture. You can see Banderas Bay down at the bottom. You can see where I am based in Sayulita, and you can see Puerto Vallarta. If on a good day when there's no traffic, you should be able to drive there in about an hour. So what we noticed is Puerto Vallarta doesn't get whales very early on in the season. I only started, I worked in Puerto Vallarta actually for 10 years before I worked in Sayulita. And the whale watching season, Mexico is one of the only places in the world that has a legal whale watching season. We have very specific dates. It starts on the 8th of December and it finishes on the 23rd of March. And that is because that is when there's higher densities of whales in the region. We don't want people going out harassing the whales when there's very few whales. But once I started doing research in Sayulita, I started to realize there's actually a lot of whales in Sayulita early on in the season, far before they were getting reports in Puerto Vallarta. And they're often coming very, very close to the coast. Now I'm going to draw this line. This is an imaginary. We don't know. There's only one whale that's been tagged that they actually managed to get coming through Mexico, going all the way down to Central America. And it was much later in the season, and it swam right past the Marias Islands, completely missed Sayulita and Puerto Vallarta. So that whale doesn't count. This is an imaginary line from my mind of how the whales may be migrating through. Definitely, and when I say from my mind, this is backed up by following whales and seeing where they're going, but we haven't actually tagged them, and by the routes of our vessel tracks. But it seems to be that they come in very close to Sayulita, and then they go south and they carry on their journey down to Central America. So each year we start getting reports already now. So this picture was taken just the other day. This picture was taken on October the 5th. So we have humpback whales here already. And as a whale researcher, especially someone who's devoting much of her time now to trying to photograph early season whales, it's incredibly frustrating. I don't have a house with view, but I do live close to the beach. I spend a lot of time with binoculars looking for the whales. But I have to reach out to the local community and really ask them, please, please, let us know. If you see a blow, let us know. Doesn't rhyme in Spanish, but but it's really a community effort, because we in our first year just started going out from October the 15th every year, every day, boop, boop, boop. And we wasted a huge amount of money. There's just such low densities of whales at this time, and unfortunately we don't have that much money in general in Mexico for whale research. There's not people out there every day, and often whale watching boats are used for platforms. So we really, after the first year of blowing a lot of cash and not having much results, we're like, right, we need to reach out to the local community. I already work with the fishermen, that's who I work with, as you saw from those boats, and really just express to them how important it is. If you see a whale, that you ring us immediately and you tell us, and I'm ready to go. So we are often, this is where I live. This is actually my house is right there, and we just got this beautiful area of coast. And for me, it's hard to even sleep sometimes because I know the whales are starting to swim by. I know right now there's potentially whales swimming by. The last time they were seen was on Wednesday. 2 whales at 9 o'clock in the morning swam past Sayulita. I didn't get out there, unfortunately. The people who saw them were surfing and didn't tell me for several hours. But it was confirmed by about 4 different people. And then I went out Friday, didn't see anything. We've had some rough weather since, so I'm going to go out tomorrow and look for them. But this is just how can we document early season whales? And we really realize that the main way we can do it is by community effort, by asking anyone, especially people having friends in high places, literally having friends with houses that have sea views, because they are the ones who can who just sit up there and relax and get to see the whales. So that's what we've been doing. We spend a lot of the time just sitting around. This is me and my captain. We're actually sitting on the lifeguard tower there, and we're just trying to, every morning I spend 2 hours looking for the whales. This is actually from my house. You can see this is going straight down to the beach. That's the lifeguard tower that we sit in. This is the view. Oh, it's a little bit noisy, sorry. But that's the ocean right out in front. And yeah, this is what happens when someone rings me and says they've seen a whale. I jump in my golf cart. It takes me, usually depending on traffic, and Sayulita is quite popular for tourism. Takes me about 5 minutes usually to get through town. I've already rang up my captain by this point, and he's getting the boat ready, hopefully, if he's contactable. And then we're down and we are off and we are out. So it's pretty grassroots, but it's, there's such important implications for us being able to photograph these whales. So preliminary results, we've been doing this for 4 seasons now, and for the money that we were funded by you guys, it managed to pay for 22 surveys. So we matched some of it, and we managed to use the money towards 22 different surveys. In total, there were 7 that we didn't see any whales. That does happen, unfortunately. I should say there was one that we saw, just one whale blowing in the distance. I'm sure, I know it was a humpback whale, but rarely this happens. It didn't come back up and we couldn't find it. And we sat, these are 3-hour trips, but we sat there actually for a lot longer than we should have. We sat there for an hour waiting because we were so confused how we'd lost the whales. But we sighted the whales on 15 of the trips, and we managed to get 58 fluke identification images. So it really is very challenging. Each whale tail is worth gold. There were days that we went out and we've been told there were whales and we just couldn't find them. But we were really just overwhelmed and so grateful to be helped and aided to get out in the water, because that's the real cost, is to be able to get out in the water and see them and take photos. So 58. This is just a little bit of a preliminary analysis. We're actually in the process of doing it all now, and this is just the early season whales that we saw in the 2023 season. So you can see at this time of year, all of the whales are from California and Oregon. So in early November and early December, so the pre-season whales, as of yet, in all the years we've been doing this, we have not seen any Alaskan whales. We have never ever seen even a Washington whale. we have we have not seen a BC whale or a Russian whale. These are pure California and Oregon whales coming through right now. Or literally all of them are Californian, in fact. And at the start of the season, so the first 2 weeks, 50% of them had also been seen in Central America. The fact that the other 50% haven't been seen in Central America does not mean they are not California and Oregon. Sorry, does not mean they're not Central American whales. So research effort in Central America has only really increased dramatically within the last 10 years. We do not have the data on Central American whales that we do on Mexican whales, where people have been researching them since the 1980s. We still have spatial gaps where there's not any research going on. There's not effort going on for the extended time that there is in Mexico. So there's probably a significant amount of the Central American DPS that is still not being identified. There's still a discovery rate where we work in El Salvador, which is significantly higher than in Mexico. So these, I would suggest, were all probably Central American whales coming through. When we get through a little bit later, we're starting to see a higher proportion that have been seen just from California and Oregon. So they may be more the mainland Mexico stock, but definitely it's the very early whales that we can see has a very high proportion that are Central American whales, and that's a challenge. We're trying to get them when they're coming through so sporadically, and there's one every 5 days. And it really is a challenge. But this is 4 years now. This will be our 4th year this year of doing it. And I'm very excited for what's going to happen with the analysis and the results and what we're going to be able to show. I can say at this stage, just from what we've been doing, that later on in the season, it's not usually till January the 15th that we start to see whales coming through from other areas. So Russian whales, never seen really before, very rarely anyway, do we see before January the 15th, or the Aleutian Island whales or any whales, and we know that from information from the splash study. So they're much later in the season. And then we have a time at the end of the season where we have a lot of unidentified whales. We're not sure who those whales, sorry, when I say unidentified, I mean unidentified to a foraging area. So they've never been seen in a high latitude feeding area. So we're not sure where those whales are coming from. To me, it's a real big mystery. And then at the end of the season, again, we have the Central America whales. But this money was used to fund the early season research, which is just the frustrating research, the research that takes a lot of time and effort, and just to be ready and on call and ready to go the whole time. So you can see this is from the season that we just did. There's a few extra trips that where I jumped in on whale watch boats, but these are the number of whales that we saw on each trip. So the 31st of October, there was a group of 8 whales that came through. It was yeah, very early in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, and you can see we had quite a lot of unsuccessful trips early on. Sometimes we saw whales, but we didn't get IDs, which is what I was talking about before. Sometimes we did manage to get IDs as well, but this is the actual number of whales that was sighted on each trip. And so you can see it wasn't till around the 15th of November, after by the 19th, we were seeing them on every trip. And so the encounter rate was kind of about three whales an hour from then onwards. But you can see early on, very sporadic, often just one group coming through, and just us running down to the ocean and getting the opportunity to take photos of their tails and ID them. So who did we see? This one was a good one. Right eye with the yearling carp. So right eye, I know, is very well known in Monterey Bay. I also know during the Splash project was seen down in Nicaragua. So I think it was in 2006. Was matched to Nicaragua. Dates back to 1996. She's a female. And why I really like seeing right eye is I actually saw right eye in January in 2023, and she didn't have a calf. So she was in Mexico without a calf, being chased by 2 males in the south of the Bay of Banderas. And then you guys saw her up in Monterey Bay, or someone saw her, no, not necessarily you guys, with a calf. So she must have been almost ready to give birth when I saw her in January 2023. And then I saw her again, and she was with a yearling calf. So the calf had been born potentially down in Central America, because she's a Central American whale. She'd gone all the way back up to where you all are, up in Northern California, and then she'd taken her calf back down, and she was swimming past Sayulita on the 11th of November, and she was being escorted. So that was beautiful. And then we saw Gollum. I believe Gollum was named by Joel in Nicaragua, but Gollum is a male, and he was actually seen, I think the first time was in 2000, but he was seen also during the Splash project in Nicaragua, in northern Nicaragua in 2006, and it's a well-known, well, I think even in Costa Rica has been seen now too. But we saw Gollum swim by in a group of 3 whales, and he's a very famous whale as well. So just a couple of the whales that we saw that just, I recognize these ones by sight, and it's always a true pleasure to see a whale that I immediately let my friends know when I've seen a whale that's important to them. And I was pretty excited about seeing. I was actually out in the water with Oregon State University and people from WAB, so the Universidad Autónoma de Baja California Sur, their research group Prima, and we were all out together seeing getting chased by these 2 males, and I couldn't believe that she was with calf. So she must have been ready to give birth right at that time when we seen. But it's also just always so joyful to see a humpback whale make it down with their yearling calf, knowing they've completed their full migration, imprinted that migratory route on their calf, and that hopefully in the future the calf's going to continue migrating through these waters for decades and decades to come. Future plans. So there is limitations of what I can present to you today because of other people involved in the publication, and the reports that we're doing, which is quite a few other people. But I am very excited to be able to present it to you again in the future. So I hope, if that's okay with everyone, and if you want me to, I would be more than welcome to come back when we have all of the analysis completed and all of the results in, and that we will, because it's 4 years of data this, that we will be able to present to you everything that we have done and all the work that your funding has contributed to, because it is planned to be a NOAA report. It's also going to be a peer review publication. Definitely going to be presented in the SMM conference in Puerto Rico in 2026. And it's also data that's being used for a PhD student who's doing her PhD student in Prima in La Paz in Baja California. So this data is going to be used for all sorts of things. And we're really hoping that this early season research is going to give us new insight into the migratory timing of humpback whales from California of the Central America DPS, and then it's really going to help with the management of the humpback whales of California and help kind of reduce human and wildlife conflict up in California. So thank you so much. Thank you to all the people that helped as well. There's a lot of people involved in this project. And do any of you have any questions for me?
Thank you so much for everything. And yeah, we have a few questions, but you did a fantastic job, and really appreciate all of the great information there. I get the first question is kind of a curiosity. Is there do you collaborate closely with any of the Northern California or kind of otherwise other nonprofits up here? Like, do you talk to like the Marine Mammal Center or Point Blue or any of those folks?
So the great things about humpback whales is they connect people. So I collaborate, as in I work on publications and reports with people. I always share all of my data with anyone that requests. I'm 100% for collaboration. So there's many different reports that I've done that I've been part of, and then I've also written myself, that I have collaborated with people, specifically with the Marine Mammal Center. I met some people down here at a present conference in Kalima last year, and we had some good chats about the whales that connect us. But I don't directly work at the moment with anyone in particular. I mean, a lot of the researchers and obviously the whale watch boats and all of those people, Ted Cheeseman, I work closely with, but yeah.
Awesome. And then I guess kind of similar to that point, when you're talking about some of the migratory patterns, can you talk a little bit about how long those take? You know, whether it's from Northern California down to where you are, or like the Alaska group, and do they and kind of how does that impact when they're leaving those spots?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand the question. What was the question?
Just like duration of how long the migration trips are, essentially from different points to where you are.
Yeah, so it really depends where they're migrating down from, but 2.5, 3 weeks from California. I think the quickest time from Alaska in the publication is 38 days. It really depends. I had a publication came out recently about the humpback whales coming from Russia, and we have no idea how quickly they actually managed to make the migration from Russia. Is 8,500 kilometers. We have no idea why they're crossing that great distance, trans-Pacific migration. I think the quickest time that we found those, 150 days. I'm sure they're doing it much quicker than that. No one's managed to tag a whale from between here and Russia, though. What's very interesting is we have started to notice that Central American whales will actually stop off in Nayarit, in this area of Mexico. So we have some whales that we'll see for 3 or 4 days, and then they've been seen further south. So they'll stop here, presumably because of the high densities of breeding adults, and they may have a little stop off and then continue down on their migration. We've also seen females from the Central America population that give birth here, that we believe then carry on traveling down to their Central America breeding areas. But it's all still so much that we're learning. So there's several, actually 3 publications we're working on right now on that subject, and just trying to understand what kind of is the divide between the Central America humpback whales and the Mexico humpback whales.
Awesome. And on that same point, have you noticed any, I guess, shifts in the migration times as far as like what time of year they're going, based on, if the weather is getting warmer earlier or anything like that, or has there not really been any shifts over the past decade or so?
There's 100% why that we're not doing this in just 1 year. So we're looking for interannual variation, and we do see a big difference in humpback whales and the time they're arriving and the time they leave, depending on whether it's an El Nino or La Nina. So it seems to be, and we're trying to get the evidence, so the data to back this up. The La Nina years, the colder years, and when we get earlier whales, they stay longer. We seem to have much higher encounter rates, much higher densities. El Nino, obviously, we all know about the 2016. Well, I'm sure many of you heard the heat wave that occurred in 2014 to 2016, and the 2016 humpback whale season, where we were at 25%. They all left early, hardly any whales. It was throughout all the breeding areas of the North Pacific. It was shocking. And they hardly had any down in Central America. And so we are seeing big impacts from differences in the El Nino Southern Oscillation, and depending on whether it's La Nina and an El Nino year. So that's why we're definitely trying to collect data for longer periods. We're aiming for 4 years, but we might carry on. But we've had El Nino years and 2 La Nina years in that time. And this year it's predicted probably to end up being another La Nina year.
Makes sense. Thank you. And then we had one question on, has there been any reports of other cetacean species traveling with the humpbacks? Like, are the orcas following them, or is there anything notable there?
But we're getting increased observations of orca attacks, predation on humpback whales in this area. Really, since 2018, we have been seeing much more evidence of orcas predating on humpback whales in this region. It dates back, you know, there's evidence of them attacking humpback whales here since the 80s, but really dramatically within the last 5 years, probably every year now, we'll have at least, you know, 15 sightings within a season. And there's often a 2-week period that we will start to see orca every day. So we'll see killer whales every day. And so everyone's very excited and interested as to whether this is just increased people on the water, increased cell phones, you know, and more people are actually being out there and observing, or are we actually getting an increase in predation of orca or killer whales on humpback whales in this area? And we're just not sure, but it's definitely something that's very interesting to see. And yeah, we're just trying to collect as much data on it as possible to be able to support these new ideas.
Awesome. And then we had a few on some specific whales. So one of our close friends of ACS, Jody Friediani, photographed a whale called Gigantic about 3 weeks ago in Monterey Bay, and that whale's been seen kind of in your neck of the woods in past years. They were wondering if, sorry, Gigantor, yeah, was wondering if you've seen them yet this season.
No, I haven't, to be honest, I haven't managed to ID any whales yet this season. I've tried. The first ones this year were spotted. There was a mother and calf that was seen in the last week of September. They were around for 5 days. Myself and one of the other main biologists in Bayada, we both went out on 3 different, well, I went out on 1 occasion, she went out on 2 occasions to try and find them. Did not manage to find them. But several people reported them over a week period. So there's been a mother and calf, no fluke identification images, no idea who they are. Then there was 2 sightings of just whales. Then there was that sighting of 2 whales the other day. So it's been 4 sightings already this season. And I have not managed to photograph any of them. It's very frustrating, this early season research. I know every year the earliest I've managed to get photo IDs is October the 14th. And then 1 year someone took a photo on August the 30th, which was just very random, but it was, I believe it was a mother and calf that had, timing was off, and it wasn't a southern hemisphere humpback whale in that case. It was actually identified to the northern hemisphere, but the earliest usually is around late September, and the earliest that I personally ID'd a whale is October the 14th. But if you imagine, before, we were only really starting IDing them on December the 8th. There's several months difference, so really it's a lot of time and energy, but it's so rewarding when we manage to ID them, and when they come back as a Central America whale, or as one like Jody mentioned that we know, it is just so exciting. And I would tell Jody, I will tell her if I see any of her whales, she'll be on my list of people to message straight away.
Absolutely, awesome. And then one more on Gollum, the one that you were talking about. Is that so? He has a pretty nasty scar on the fluke. Is that where he got his name? And do you know what caused that? Is it a ship strike or an attack, or just kind of anyone's guess?
No, but you know, I remember looking at that. It's not that long. I would have to check on Happy Whale, but I think it's less than 10 years that big on the right fluke that makes it for him very noticeable. Yeah, very easy to ID. No, and he was named by someone in Nicaragua, Gollum. He's named by Joelle in Nicaragua. She's her favorite whale, so if I see him, I have to tell her. But yeah, I do remember checking, and that from my memory, that big scar is within the last 10 or so years. Look on Happy Whale, but
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions that we have, and thank you so much again for coming. And absolutely, to answer your last question, you absolutely should come back whenever you have an update for us, and I'll
really
pass
look
it back
forward
over to
to it.
Susan.
This was really just to show you what we've been doing. I have some limitations on how much I can present at this moment because of data agreements, but I really look forward to coming back and being able to show you where and how your funding has really helped, because this has potential to make some, really, really good impact on trying to reduce that conflict, because I work with fishermen and I appreciate fishermen and their families and people who rely on the ocean, and just trying to make it so that everything, just trying to reduce conflict so that the whales do better, that the people rely on the ocean do better. And it's something that's really close to my heart. So thank you.
Nico, we will definitely be in touch to schedule you and stay in touch with this great work. It's it's truly groundbreaking what you're doing. So
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you to everyone, especially to Christine's family. Thank you so much for the award and for creating it. And thank you to everyone at your chapter, and it's really appreciated.
okay, all the best. Thanks, everyone. See you on November 19th for our next talk on Pacific right whales.
Yay.
All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you.